Welcome to Gakkogura. We're so excited to have you here for the next week taking part in this special program that we've put together. This morning, I just want to go over really briefly what your experience is going to look like during the week that you're here and how that is going to correlate with the sake making process that you'll be experiencing throughout the duration. If you're here taking part in this program, it means you probably already have a very significant interest in sake and probably a pretty good understanding as to what that process looks like. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time speaking in detail about every single stage in the process, but I do want to outline just briefly how you're going to be primarily spending your time and what parts of the process you're really going to be involved in and what we're going to really want you to pay attention to while you're here. So then with regards to those processes, obviously we start with polishing the rice. That happens off-site during the winter when all the other rice polishing is happening. We have a refrigeration unit here where we can keep that polished rice for whenever we need it. You'll be doing a lot of washing, just about every day, washing that rice, then soaking that rice after it's done. That rice that has then been soaked is then going to be steamed. This is how you'll be starting a number of your days here. The first time you set foot in the brewery is going to be when this steaming is just about done. So this is where a lot of your processes are going to start day in and day out. That steamed rice, once it comes off of there piping hot, will then have to cool before it's then transferred to whatever stage in the process that it's going to be used in. This is super, super hot when it comes off the steamer here. So you're gonna have to be really careful. We'll touch upon that again in a moment. But this is going to be a regular part of just about every day that you're here in the brewery. That steamed rice is then going to go one of two places. It's either going to go into koji production, it's going to be turned into koji, or it's going to be used as part of the mashing process or the shikomi down this way. So when that rice then comes off the steamer, you will then be following it to wherever it needs to be utilized in the process. It may move on to koji production, which we'll discuss in a bit more detail is about a 48-hour process. It could be going there. It could be going to the main fermentation mash or the shikomi to be used in one of the three stages there. Depending on the day, depending on what you're working on, it could go to one or possibly even both. All of this together, this is going to be the primary focus of your experience. A lot of the work prior to and after this are things that will have been handled here at the brewery by the brewers, either prior to your visit or after you've all left. These two elements, the koji production as well as this sandanjikomi or the shikomi, are the core of your program. So we've timed it so that while you're here, you'll get to see and experience and go hands-on with these core elements of the production. After that, of course, we have pressing. We use what's called a fune here, these bags that the moromi or the completed fermentation mash goes into. You'll probably have a chance to wash these a few times. If you want to come back for the pressing, we'll be sure to let you know when that's happening. And if you have the chance to come back to the island and join us for that, certainly we'd love to have you. But we probably won't be able to see that while you're here. After pressing, we have pasteurization and bottling. Again, things that probably won't be happening while you're here. But if you ever come back to pay us a visit during some other time of the year, you may get a chance to see or experience just a little piece of those. So while you're here and while you're in the brewery, you're going to be busy. The brewers, the toji, they're not going to have time to necessarily explain each and every part of the process in a great deal of detail all along the way. We've prepared time for questions later on in the program. So I encourage you just to, while you're in there, just pay attention, be aware, see how people are moving, see where the other brewers and what the toji is paying attention to. Notice how they move, notice how they don't move. Pay attention to those little things and share those together with the rest of your team and the people that you're here taking part in the program with. Those little things that each of you notice over time, you'll start noticing more and more throughout the week. And those are really going to, by paying attention, that's really going to lend to your experience while you're here, and that shared experience together with the team that you're with, as well as the brewers and the toji. So with that in mind, as you're taking part in these different processes, I said just be aware. And I think that in doing so, you'll realize how much you can really learn and gain just through that general awareness. So as I mentioned, being involved in the koji making process is going to be a major component of the program here. We've timed it so that you will be able to take part in this process actually multiple times in many cases. And so that hot rice that then comes off the steamer just about each and every day, a portion of that is going to make it into the koji muro, or the room where we're making koji. That first part of the process, what they call hikikomi, which is essentially just bringing that koji into the koji muro. It's there. We'll then apply the koji spores, which will allow it to inoculate the rice and then propagate over the following 48 hours or so. The koji making process as a whole, while it spans about 3 days, is generally about a 48-hour process, give or take a couple of hours. That first stage after hikikomi, after bringing the koji in and applying those spores, we'll mound it up, keep it warm, keep it consistent for several hours until we have what's called kirikaeshi. That koji is going to start to get a little crusty around the outside in order to keep the humidity and the moisture, the airflow consistent. We're going to break that down, remount it again, and that'll pretty much make up day one with regards to koji making. After that, you may have a chance to take part in what is called mori. At the beginning, it's one big mound, but as we get into the later stages in day 2, and the koji really starts to propagate, temperature control is going to become much more important. So what we end up doing is taking that big amount of rice, breaking it down, and placing it in smaller trays so that we have greater control over the final 24 hours. From mori, we'll then have 2 stages, naka shigoto, shimai shigoto, where at a number of certain hour intervals, we'll head back into the koji muro in order to basically mix it up a little bit. Make sure everything is consistent, make sure there's enough airflow. As I mentioned, we're going to need more control in order to make sure we can control the temperature so that we get the right degree of propagation of the koji at these later stages. The very end, day koji, essentially removing the koji from the koji muro. We'll take it, bring it to a cool refrigerated room where we can keep it cool and dry it out, then until it's used in one of these stages in the shikomi process. And then the other core component of the experience that you'll be taking part in is this shikomi process, or the mashing process. As imagine many of you are probably familiar, there's something that actually has to happen before that, the preparation of the fermentation starter, what's often referred to as the moto. Depending on the program and your timing, this could be part of your program. In many cases it may not. It may have already been prepared in advance. However, if you are taking part in this, the koji that you made here may end up going into the starter here. So if you're lucky, you may get a chance to go hands-on with that as well. However, the main part of the program is going to be built around this sandan jikomi, this 3-step mashing process. So this 3-step process is actually spread out over 4 days. Day 1, we add the fermentation starter that has already been prepared in advance, water, koji, and then steamed rice. Day 2 is what we call odori, a day of rest. Day 3, a bit more water, a bit more koji, a bit more steamed rice. And then on day 4, again, the same additions, water, koji, rice, at slightly greater volume. So on many mornings when the rice comes off the steamer, it's going to be destined for either koji production or for shikomi. These things won't overlap while you're here. They would in a regular sake brewery, as you've got a lot more production happening, a lot of things happening in parallel. While you're here, however, the steamed rice that you'll be using will be allocated to either one of these things on any given day. So you may take that steamed rice and head to the koji muro, or you'll take that steamed rice and head straight into the shikomi process happening right there in that same space. Throughout the week, every day you'll be meeting in this room here. Prior to getting started, we'll have a brief meeting, a brief rundown of the program and the schedule every single day. So be sure to, of course, be on time, but then be sure to pay attention prior to going into the brewery each morning, as you'll get an outline as to not just what you're doing, but why and how those different things are going to be used and utilized in the process that day. Then at the end of the day, once you're all done and all finished up and the Toji tells you it's okay to go home, we'll also do a quick check of the meeting time for the next day, as well as what the schedule is going to be for the next day. Depending on how things progress, there could be a little bit of slight fluctuation day to day. There might be small change of plans or meeting times and things of that nature. We can only control so much in the brewery. A bit of that is up to the elements, and so depending on how things go, there could be slight changes, so be sure to be on time and be sure to check with the Toji, with the other brewers, and with the staff here at the beginning of the day, in the morning meeting, as well as at the end of the day when things finish up. And so before we get started, lastly, I just want to go over just a couple of things you'll want to keep in mind for the duration of the program while you're here. One, for all of you natto lovers out there, natto is forbidden this week. Many of you may know that natto and koji do not play very well together. You don't want to be the one who had natto in the morning and destroyed the whole batch of sake. So please refrain from eating any natto during the week while you're here. Second, while in the brewery, it is a work environment that is busy and clean, but sometimes messy. The floors are slippery, there's hoses running around, there's things scattered about. Just be careful, pay attention to your surroundings. We don't want anybody hurt while we're here. We take the best care that we can to make sure that everybody is prepared and comfortable and safe throughout their experience here. But do be aware and keep in mind that this is a space that people work in. So just please do pay attention to the things around you. Don't feel like you have to rush or run. We don't want anybody slipping and hurting themselves or anything like that while they're here. So third thing, a great deal of the work in the brewery is actually pretty physically demanding. You're going to be having to lift and move heavy things, sometimes carrying them or retaining them for an extended period of time. For example, the soaked rice. When you strain it, you're going to have to take about 15 kilos of rice and just keep it and hold and maintain it here for about a minute or so. It's not easy. If you drop that rice, everything is kind of a wash. So if you feel like it might be too heavy, or if while you're doing that, you feel like you need some help, do not hesitate to ask for help either from one of your teammates or from one of the brewers. Everybody is here to help. It's not a week where we're trying to challenge you or punish you physically by any means. So if you need help, ask for it. If you need to rest, say so. Don't overdo it. Not only do we not want to ruin any sake while we're here, we also just don't want anybody hurt. We want everybody to go home and have a great experience. So along the way, if there's any part of the experience that you feel might be a little bit too physically demanding, please don't hesitate to speak up and ask for help. And then lastly, some things will be heavy. Some things will be very, very hot. In particular, for a lot of you, you'll be starting your program with the steaming. And this might be how you start your day on day one and how you're going to start a number of your days here at the brewery. The rice that comes off that steamer is incredibly hot. You're going to have to take that, physically move it, transfer it, lay it out, and mix it up and cool that down. It's very, very hot. You're going to be wearing gloves, so you'll be somewhat protected, but not nearly enough to protect you completely from that hot steam there. Be very, very careful. And again, as with lifting heavy things and all that, don't overdo it, and don't force yourself to do anything you don't feel comfortable being able to do safely. Just be aware that things that are hot are hot. Things that are heavy look heavy, and many times, more often than not, are actually heavy. So until you really get a feel for what you're taking part in, particularly these first 2 or 3 days, get a feel for the demands of the process, what you're comfortable with, what you may not be, and try to figure out the rhythm that you'll be comfortable taking part in. And last but not least, remember that making sake is a team effort. It's all about teamwork, communicating, working together, and supporting one another. Whether that's the rest of your team members that you're here taking part in the Gakogura program with, or the instructors, teachers, toji, brewers, kurabito, they're all here to support you and one another in, of course, making fantastic sake, but also having an incredible experience during the week that you're here. So communicate, talk, chat, share, enjoy, and have a fantastic time throughout your week here at Gakogura.